Welcome, one and all, to Cinematic Excrement. My quest to review every movie that has won the Razzie for Worst Picture wrapped up a few months ago, but the Golden Raspberry Foundation continues to exist despite the rules of logic and good taste, and they recently added yet another winner to that category. It's a slasher flick featuring characters from beloved childhood stories, a concept that at least had the potential to be interesting were there some actual honest-to-God effort behind the project. But therein lies the problem. Let's get this over with. Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey.
I am not looking forward to this review. Can you tell? I mean, I have seen lazy, cynical cash grabs before. That's the Asylum's bread and butter. But I'm pretty sure even they would think Blood and Honey was beneath them. People who make Asylum movies are naturally restricted by minimal budgets and, in many cases, competence. But generally, they still try. And they even manage to be entertaining once in a while. I still stand the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter mockbuster Abraham Lincoln vs. Zombies, purely for the fact that I get to hear Honest Abe shout as he slashes at the undead abominations before him, "Emancipate this." Blood and Honey is not Abraham Lincoln vs. Zombies. Blood and Honey provides neither effort nor entertainment, and I'm not sure it was meant to.
If you're wondering how this movie came to be, the copyright for A.A. Milne's original Winnie-the-Pooh book expired in 2022, and it is now in the public domain. And low-budget British filmmaker Rhys Frake Waterfield pounced on the opportunity to make a movie about these characters. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with the concept of making movies featuring public domain characters. Disney has been doing that for the better part of a century. But suffice to say, Rhys Frake Waterfield is not Walt Disney. Though I imagine he's probably glad he's not Walt Disney, because if he was, he'd be dead.
Blood and Honey was filmed in 10 days and cost about $50,000, and I assume the story treatment was written on the back of a cocktail napkin. Thanks to its low budget, it was all but guaranteed to turn a profit, and indeed it made a little over $5 million at the box office. The movie was not highly thought of by critics or the general public. Hell, Frake Waterfield claims the mere announcement of the movie's production resulted in death threats.
And I want to make it very clear that I do not condone such things. Say whatever you want about the guy and his shitty movie. I'm about to, but anyone who sends someone death threats purely because they made a bad movie can eat the corns out of my shit. Now that we have that out of the way...
In addition to Worst Picture honors, Blood and Honey also won Worst Screenplay, Worst Director, Worst Screen Combo for Pooh and Piglet, and Worst Remake, Ripoff, or Sequel. And in the Worst Picture category, it was up against 4 sequels: The Exorcist, Believer, Expendables, Meg 2, The Trench, and Shazam! Fury of the Gods. This is a bit confusing as the Worst Remake, Ripoff, or Sequel category did not include Shazam or Meg 2, but it's not like the Razzies ever made much sense before. Why would they start now? In any case, Blood and Honey was an easy pick for Worst Picture given the competition. Shazam was mediocre, and the rest were just dumb, but not especially terrible. They may make you feel like you've wasted your money. Blood and Honey will make you feel like you've wasted your life. The movie opens with an animated prologue describing how Christopher Robin wandered into the 100-acre wood one day and befriended some strange animals that the movie describes as crossbreeds. For the sake of my sanity, I'm not going to ask too many questions about that. Christopher befriended them and brought them food, but after several years, he grew up and had to leave the woods to go to college and become a doctor.
If you're wondering what Chris becoming a doctor has to do with the plot, it doesn't.
Incapable of surviving on their own, Pooh, Piglet, Rabbit, and Owl were brought to the brink of starvation and resorted to eating Eeyore to survive. You heard me, they ate Eeyore.
This movie wastes no time taking a baseball bat to your childhood. Not gonna lie, a part of me respects the chutzpah.
After burying what was left of their dearly digested friend, they made a pact to return to their animalistic roots and never talk again.
Because having them not talk was cheaper than hiring people who could do the voices.
And I know they were working with a budget that's less than the average annual salary, but having the characters not talk just makes me wonder what could have been. Imagine Winnie-the-Pooh as a homicidal maniac with that classic Sterling Holloway voice, which I shall now impersonate very poorly. You left us to starve, Christopher Robin, and now we're going to make a meal out of your entrails.
That would be creepy as hell. And that's the kind of thing this movie should be doing, but it's not. It's not doing much of anything.
Also, about them returning to their animalistic roots, I'm not sure Frank Waterfield actually knows what that word means, unless you think animalistic involves wearing clothes, using tools and weapons, driving cars, and ritual sacrifice or whatever the hell is going on here. Oh, dear, we must sacrifice this virgin to the devil.
I promise that will be my last shitty impression of a Winnie-the-Pooh character.
And if you're wondering why I'm not bothering with an impression of Rabbit or Owl, it's because apart from the prologue, they're not in the movie. I'm not kidding. The only two we ever see are Pooh and Piglet. What happened to Rabbit and Owl? Did they piss off and go do their own thing? Were they also cannibalized? Is cannibalized even the right word? I don't know. And the movie's certainly not going to tell you.
My guess is they were originally supposed to be in the movie, but Frank Waterfield realized he couldn't afford 2 more costumes, so we'll just pretend they were never mentioned.
We fast forward to a now grown-up Christopher Robin and his fiancée, whose name I can't be bothered to remember because, spoiler alert, she gonna die. He has returned to the 100-acre wood to check up on his childhood friends, and somehow his fiancée agreed to go along with meeting several talking animals.
I certainly don't want you to think I'm crazy.
I don't think you're crazy, Chris.
I just think whatever mushrooms you found while you were wandering around in the woods may have had some unintended side effects.
They find where Christopher's childhood friends used to live, but something has changed. Exactly what is not clear, as the movie spends more time telling us something is wrong than showing us. For example,
Chris? Is that you?
Yes. Why is it like that?
Why is what like what? I can't see what the fuck you're looking at!
Does Frank Waterfield not understand the concept of framing? Has he never seen a movie? Reese, the only way the audience can know what's wrong with that photo of Christopher Robin, at least I assume that's what that was supposed to be, is if you show them what's wrong with it. I find it a little disconcerting that I have to spell that out.
Deep in the 100-acre wood where Christopher Robin plays, you'll find the abandoned trailer park. Wait, what? Yes, the house at Pooh Corner now features a bunch of trailers, or, since we're in the UK, caravans. Why? No idea. It's never explained.
I mean, the real reason is likely because that's where they could afford to film. Does it make sense? No, but it doesn't matter. Needs must.
So, day turns to night in the blink of an eye because the director has never heard of transitions, and Chris's fiancée, along with your childhood, are straight up murdered by Piglet while Chris exclaims, "Why are you doing this?" And, "I never would have left, I swear!" And, "Why are you doing this?" Again. And, "I never would have left, I swear!" Again.
This duplicated dialogue is baffling. It's almost like they took 2 takes of the same scene and put both in the movie. Either that or the actor playing Christopher Robin was improvising his dialogue and ran out of things to say, so he just started repeating himself. Either way, it's so weird.
Chris is left alive, but captured by Pooh and Piglet. You can use all the terrible lighting you want, it doesn't hide the fact that those are some Spirit Halloween-ass looking costumes. And for the most part, that's it for Chris until the end of the movie. There is a brief scene where Pooh tortures Chris by whipping him with what I assume is supposed to be Eeyore's tail, but really it looks like someone cut off Bianca Belair's braid and dyed it gray. But apart from those few minutes, Christopher Robin is pretty much an afterthought.
The premise of the movie is Pooh and Piglet have gone feral because Christopher Robin left them, and then he's barely in the movie at all. What takes up most of the runtime is basically just generic slasher movie number 58,273.
The character we actually focus on is a young woman named Maria, played by Maria Taylor. Maria was once stalked by some weirdo, and thankfully the creep ended up in prison. But Maria is still a bit traumatized by the whole thing. Her therapist suggests taking a vacation, so she does exactly that with some of her friends. And this is what leads me to believe the script for this movie originally had nothing at all to do with Winnie-the-Pooh. The obvious setup here is the creepy stalker breaks out of prison or gets out on a technicality or something, and he tracks down Maria, kills some of her friends, and she and the stalker have one last confrontation before she finishes him off for good. Frank Waterfield made several low-budget horror movies prior to Blood and Honey, and I would not be surprised if this started out as one of his regular cheap-ass films. But he hastily reworked it, turning the stalker into Pooh and Piglet.
Of course, I cannot prove that's the case, but there is this line.
Why won't he leave me alone? He just keeps following me everywhere I go.
That line only makes sense if she's being attacked by her original human stalker, not an anthropomorphic barren pig that she just met.
Anyway, the house they're renting is conveniently right next to the 100-acre wood, and in another sign that this movie was hastily thrown together, there's an 80-yard reference to a sixth girl who was supposed to join them, who we immediately see get attacked and killed by Pooh. This girl is never mentioned again and was clearly not part of the original story, but she did pad out the running time a bit. That was nice of her. Oh, come on, how does he not see her? She's not remotely hidden!
Reese, your lack of understanding of basic shot composition astounds me. Tommy Wiseau is a better director than you. I said what I said.
Getting back to our future victims, the first thing the girls do upon arrival is give up their phones as they want to completely unplug and have no distractions. Obviously, this is meant to provide an excuse for the problem that plagues many horror movies nowadays. Why don't they just call for help? The problem is, they just left their phones on a table and can easily grab them whenever they want, as one of the girls does a few hours later.
So they tried to give us a reason why they couldn't just call for help, and then immediately abandoned it. What was even the point?
The girl who grabbed her phone then demonstrates her stupidity to the audience by taking selfies in the hot tub, one of which accidentally captures the silly old bear. She responds to this by ignoring it and going back to the hot tub, thus allowing Pooh and Piglet to easily kill her.
You know, some people just deserve death.
The others eventually find what's left of the stupid girl's body, along with the words, "Get out," scrawled in blood on the window. Which makes no sense. The movie has made it quite clear that Pooh and Piglet are homicidal maniacs. They don't want the girls to leave, they want them to die. I don't know if this is just terrible storytelling or a half-assed reference to a much better movie, but I'm not happy about it either way. At this time, Maria reveals she has a gun. Wait, what?
Somehow, a British Gen Z woman has a gun, but does not have a phone.
And like that, you've lost me.
Fleeing the house, the girls find and free Christopher Robin. He directs them to another woman who appears to have been tied up for the previously mentioned ritual sacrifice, and she reveals some very interesting things. And by interesting, I mean stupid. Remember how Pooh and Piglet vowed never to talk again? Apparently this vow was more of a polite suggestion.
Pooh, Piglet, that's what they call themselves. They talk. It's broken English.
This movie's runtime is less than 90 minutes, and it couldn't even keep its premise straight for that long.
They free the woman who takes the gun and decides to go piglet hunting. It doesn't go well because Maria's dumbass forgot to load the gun. She dies, Piglet dies, most of the girls die, these random passersby try beating the shit out of Pooh in a scene that reminds me entirely too much of Shaun of the Dead, making it far too silly to be scary. Unfortunately for them, Pooh is apparently invincible, and they die. Pooh gets sandwiched between two cars, but shrugs that off too.
Come on, even Michael Myers would be dead by now.
And after Chris tries one last time to reconcile with his old friend, Pooh utters the only two words we hear him say in the entire movie. He then repeatedly stabs Maria in the head while Christopher Robin runs for his life. And that's it. The movie doesn't really end, it just sort of stops. And a message after the credits promises us Winnie-the-Pooh will return.
That sounds like a threat.
Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey is a colossal waste of time, which is remarkable considering how little time it takes to watch and how little time they spent filming it. Calling it half-assed would be generous. Calling it a movie would be generous. It feels more like a collection of ideas for different movies that were haphazardly thrown together in the name of a cynical cash grab. And even putting aside the budgetary limitations, it's just poorly made. Frank Waterfield has no idea how to tell a coherent story, nor any understanding of even rudimentary filmmaking techniques. He sucks, and his movie sucks.
And yet, his promise at the end of the movie has been fulfilled as he has embarked on creating a new cinematic universe with a sequel to Blood and Honey coming out earlier this year. And I've heard it's actually an improvement. I suppose that shouldn't surprise me too much. When you've hit rock bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. But still, I am genuinely curious. When I finally get a chance to see it, I'll let you know how it goes.
In any case, if you're dying to see a movie about a grown-up Christopher Robin returning to the 100-acre wood, they already made that movie 6 years ago. And sure, it's not perfect. The plot deals with a grown-up Christopher Robin who spends far too much time with work, neglecting his family as a result, and by the end of the story, he remembers how much he loves his family and learns the importance of having a good work-life balance.
Gee, never heard that one before.
But it's very sweet and actually has decent voice actors, including Jim Cummings as Pooh and Tigger. If you have Disney Plus, give it a watch. As for Blood and Honey, if you have Peacock, well, unless you're a wrestling fan, I don't know what makes Peacock worth a subscription nowadays, but this ain't it. Blood and Honey isn't even worth a free trial. It's not entertaining, it's not scary, it doesn't get anywhere near so bad it's good territory, it's a waste of beloved characters, and in the end, it'll leave you feeling more miserable than Eeyore.
Well, thank God that's over and I don't have to deal with the Razzies for another year. So in lieu of Worst Picture winners, let's take a look at a terrible comic book movie. Next time, it's Morbin time. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and all points in between who still exist, I don't care what anybody says, to Cinematic Excrement. A few months ago, we were talking about a movie called Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey, a cynical cash grab of a slasher flick featuring characters that had recently entered the public domain. I believe the exact words I used to describe this movie were a colossal waste of time. But, thanks to its low budget, it produced a colossal profit, relatively speaking. So a sequel was bound to happen, which brings us to the subject of today's review. It's time to return to the 100-Acre Wood for Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey 2.
Released in March of 2024, Blood and Honey 2 was once again directed by Rhys Frake Waterfield. This time around, he had a higher budget, which allowed him to hire someone else to write the screenplay and rework the costumes for the 100-Acre Wood characters. And with one exception that we'll get to later, they mostly look better. Not great, but better. They were also able to add some characters. Owl, who was mentioned in the intro for the first movie but otherwise not seen, and Tigger, who was never mentioned at all in the first movie as that character had not yet entered the public domain, but he has as of January 2024. Rabbit is possibly in the movie? Kind of. We'll get to that eventually.
And it's not just the characters that are different this time around. They retconned the shit out of Blood and Honey 2. Which made the movie very confusing until about the halfway point when I finally figured out what the hell was going on. The sequel is only loosely based on the first movie. Let me explain.
According to the intro for Blood and Honey 2, the events of the first movie came to be known as the 100-Acre Massacre.
Whoa! That's a good song title.
Christopher Robin, played this time around by Scott Chambers, who also served as a producer for both movies, became a social outcast because most people thought he was the murderer.
Turns out most people did not believe his story about the killers being an anthropomorphic bear and pig. Shocking, I know.
A few people did believe Christopher's story because some people will believe anything and tried to hunt down Pooh and Piglet. Yes, Piglet is somehow alive despite getting his head bashed in with a sledgehammer. Stay with me. This leads to Pooh seeking help from his old friends Owl and Tigger. Meanwhile, Christopher finishes medical school and becomes a doctor, but the hospital ultimately lets him go due to bad publicity, especially since the movie was released. And this is where it gets weird. Blood and Honey 1 is now a film within a film. It exists in the Blood and Honey 2 universe as a fictionalized version of the 100-Acre Wood Massacre.
This means the events in Blood and Honey 1 no longer matter. They can completely ignore continuity and just do whatever the hell they want. I can't decide if that's lazy or brilliant. Maybe both.
In any case, that's why the story from the first movie doesn't quite line up with the second. That's why the characters look dramatically different. That's why Piglet is still alive. Briefly.
I'm not sure why they went through the trouble of retconning his death if they were just going to kill him anyway, but okay.
That's why Chris now has friends that were never mentioned in the first movie, like Lexi, played by Tallulah Evans, who can apparently track Chris's location using her phone?
I mean, I get that they know each other, but that's still kind of creepy. If one of my friends was tracking my every move with his phone, I would probably insert his phone into him. I would not use lube.
We're also introduced to his parents and his younger sister Ella, though she insists on being called Bunny. Remember that, because we'll be coming back to that later for very weird reasons. Speaking of weird, she has apparently been playing with an old teddy bear that has human-like teeth and internal organs.
I do not know why that creepy-ass teddy bear is even in the movie. Did it just belong to one of the cast or crew? And if so, should I be grateful that they're in the UK and thus do not have easy access to guns?
We're also introduced to Chekhov's dishwasher full of kitchen knives. But before we get to that, we see a few random girls in a caravan playing with the Ouija board. What is with these movies and caravans? Are the filmmakers just big fans of Taskmaster?
Make a terrible horror movie featuring public domain characters from your childhood. You have 2 weeks and a budget of £20. Your time starts now.
The girls in said caravan are attacked because reasons, and one of the girls jumps into what appears to be a dune buggy. How is that the only vehicle you have? Surely you didn't tow the camper with that. She does not get far, and Pooh proceeds to break each of her limbs individually.
And this is where the movie starts to lose me. They repeatedly say our friends from the 100-Acre Wood are returning to their animalistic instincts. They use that word several times in both movies, animalistic. The problem is, this is not how animals behave. Animals kill for food or to protect their territory or their young. They don't just go around breaking people's limbs for funsies. This is not animalistic, this is torture porn. And if that's the kind of movie you want to make, fine, but be honest about what you're doing here.
Anyway, after senselessly torturing and killing the girls, Owl tells Pooh it's time to go on the offensive. But isn't that literally what they just did? 3 girls with a camper and a Ouija board are hardly a threat. The guys searching the woods with shotguns are certainly a threat, considering... Yeah, in any case, Owl insists it's time to attack the nearby town of Ashdown, which is not an actual town, but it is the name of the forest that was the inspiration for the 100-Acre Wood. Pooh responds to Owl's request by... saying nothing.
Except for one line at the very end, Pooh is silent throughout the entire movie. And I'm really not sure why, considering we've established we're ignoring continuity with the first movie, so Pooh's vow of silence should no longer apply. But I guess they're keeping continuity when it suits them.
Meanwhile, Chris has been seeing a hypnotherapist whose name is apparently Mary Darling, as in the mother of Wendy, John, and Michael Darling from Peter Pan. As you may be aware, after the success, well, I don't know if success is the right word. After the profitability of the first Blood and Honey movie, the filmmakers announced plans to create the TCU, Twisted Childhood Universe, which will include characters from other public domain franchises like Peter Pan, Bambi, and Pinocchio, and culminate with a massive Avengers-style crossover movie. Mary Darling's presence in Blood and Honey 2 is planting the first seeds for the TCU. Whether this will amount to anything worthwhile is anyone's guess.
Maybe we'll get something as entertaining as the Avengers, maybe we'll get the mediocrity of Justice League. Or maybe we'll get the total faceplant that was the Dark Universe. Time will tell.
Anyway, Mary takes Chris back to his childhood, and we learned he once had a twin brother named Billy, they're adding all sorts of new characters, who was kidnapped by some creep in an unmarked van. Naturally, this resulted in a lot of trauma for young Chris, but he soon found a new best friend in Winnie-the-Pooh. Oh my god, what is that? That's amazing.
So do you remember when I said the costumes mostly look better? This is the one exception. That young Winnie-the-Pooh looks hilariously stupid.
Part of it is the angry-looking bear mask, part of it is Pooh munching on a raw animal carcass, and part of it is Chris looking oh so happy despite the horrifying image in front of him. Apparently, the incident was so traumatic for young Christopher Robin that he was happy to have a friendship with anyone, and he remembered Pooh being a much more friendly silly old bear than he actually was. But Mary's hypnotherapy has shown him the horrible truth. It also showed him the identity of the van driver, a pathetic man named Cavendish, who Chris just happened to run into while visiting a friend in the hospital. He follows the guy home and finds out he used to work for some mad scientist, Dr. Gallup, who performed bizarre genetic experiments on children, combining their DNA with that of animals. He ultimately killed the abominations he created before he himself was killed by Cavendish, but the animal-human hybrids have Deadpool-like regenerative powers because... reasons, and they recovered from their fatal wounds.
And if you haven't already figured out where this is going, then you haven't been paying attention.
The inhabitants of the 100-Acre Wood are indeed Gallup's former experiments, and Winnie-the-Pooh is Chris's twin brother Billy. That is... actually an interesting idea, not gonna lie. I'm not saying the execution was perfect, but I kinda like the idea that the monster that's been haunting Chris was his long-lost brother. It doesn't really explain why Pooh and his friends went all homicidal, though, especially since their backstory from the first movie was retconned out of existence, and we no longer really know what happened during the 100-Acre Massacre. Chris finds some documents and audio recordings from Dr. Gallup because, of course, he documented his crimes against humanity.
After all, as Adam Savage once said, the difference between science and sinning against nature is writing it down. I'm paraphrasing.
But again, the doctor keeps going on about the creature's animalistic tendencies, and no, they are not. This is not how animals operate. This is how serial killers operate. Not the same thing. Anyway, Pooh and friends decide it's time for everyone to die, starting with Chris's family. Or I suppose I should say Pooh's family.
And here's what I don't get. At this point in the story, it has not yet been revealed that Pooh is Billy, but anybody with 2 brain cells to rub together has already figured that out. So why is he attacking his own parents? Does he blame them for what happened to him? Because that was never really made clear. There are a lot of things in this movie that are never really made clear. Like, why does Owl puke acid?
Oh, did I forget to mention that? Yeah, Owl pukes acid. No, I'm not going to try to make sense of that. Oh look, it's Chekhov's dishwasher full of kitchen knives.
Remember, kids, if you live near a forest populated by murderous abominations, always load your kitchen knives on the top shelf.
Both of Chris's parents bite the big one at the hands of the silly old bear, but Bunny comes face to face with Pooh and then disappears. When Chris arrives at the house later that night, he finds his parents' dead bodies, which the movie is, for some reason, deathly afraid of showing, and I'm not sure why. They clearly aren't afraid of an R rating. Would showing this shot for more than half a second really have pushed it into NC-17 territory?
I mean, honestly, the answer to that question might be yes. The MPA is weird like that.
But Bunny is nowhere to be found, alive or dead. Meanwhile, Pooh and friends decide to attack an underground rave put on by some of Chris's friends. Why they chose to attack these people in particular is not explained, but there is an awesome shot where Pooh uses a bear trap to rip someone's head off and then nails it with a baseball bat in midair.
It is so dumb, but it's the best kind of dumb.
As the animal hybrids go on a killing spree, more torture porn for all you sickos, Chris arrives at the site of the rave and... wait, why did he think to go there? I know his friends were putting on the rave. Hang on, is that why Pooh and company targeted the rave? But how could they possibly know Chris's friends were involved? How did they know about the rave at all?
Did we miss a scene that explained all of this? I'm so confused.
Also, much like the first movie, the protagonist somehow has a handgun. Those are not exactly easy to find in the UK, and even if Chris somehow managed to obtain one, I would think whatever black market dealer sold him the gun would have also sold him more than 3 bullets.
I'm not kidding. He fires a total of 3 shots and he's already out of ammo.
After a shitload of senseless killing, mostly by Tigger, who seems to be modeled after Freddy Krueger with his claws and wisecracks,
Come here, you fluorescent bitch.
Chris eventually confronts Pooh/Billy, who now has a chainsaw because if we're going to copy Freddy Krueger, we might as well throw Leatherface in there as well. But with the help of his friend Lexi, who shows up in the nick of time because she can track Chris with his phone.
Seriously, Chris, I know the tracking paid off this one time, but you gotta find some better friends.
Chris finishes off Pooh, who speaks his only line in the movie.
You know, I gotta give the movie a point for that. That was good.
And the nightmare has passed, and Chris is reunited with Bunny, who was recovered by the police. Yeah, just like that. Bunny was gone, and now she's back. What happened to her? Who knows? The movie's certainly not going to tell you.
But I have a theory. I wonder if Pooh temporarily abducted Bunny so Dr. Gallup could experiment on her. Reportedly, in the original script, Dr. Gallup was still alive, and through his experiments had become the Heffalump. And were he still alive, he certainly could have continued his experiments with Bunny, and given her preference for that name, one could infer she becomes Rabbit. But none of this is actually shown in the final cut of the movie or even hinted at, so I freely admit I'm guessing here.
And the movie ends with a hint at the animal hybrid's regenerative abilities, suggesting they could all be back for part 3.
Whether they should come back, I don't know, but that's Blood and Honey 2.
The acting and directing won't win any awards, but they're perfectly fine, and I'm glad they had the budget for better costumes this time around. Like I said earlier, they look much better. But elsewhere in the film, the prosthetics are kinda shit. In the scene where Piglet gets his head blown off, Pooh attacks one of the dudes and he accidentally shoots his friend in the face. Somehow he survived and Chris visits him in the hospital after surgery. The dude confirms Chris was right about Pooh and shows him what the animals did to him. And pardon me if this is a stupid question, but where did his mouth go?
Did they seriously just slap a skin graft on his face and turn him into the bad version of Deadpool? I'm no doctor, but I don't think you're supposed to do that. Chris, you might be lucky they fired you. I don't think it's a very good hospital.
The kills are a mixed bag. Some of them are fun. Others, as I said, are just torture porn, which is very much not my thing. And there's one in particular where they inserted some pretty weak-looking CGI hands and a blood splatter to make it look like someone was trying to pull himself out of this tree just before he got killed. It's not just bad, it's unnecessary. There was no need to include that shot. The dialogue is also hit and miss. While there are some good lines, there are some really bad ones too.
Who's the abomination now?
Is this a trick question?
And although I kind of like the idea of a mad scientist creating Pooh and Friends, the story is a hot mess with massive plot holes and things happening with no explanation. And making Blood and Honey 1 a film within a film was a little confusing, especially looking at how other characters react to the film. There's a scene where Lexi is babysitting some bratty kid who is, for some reason, dressed up as Freddy and Jason. As the kid is watching the movie, he poses this question.
Was he wearing a bear mask when he killed all those people?
What? Chris wasn't the killer in the movie. There was a guy in a cheap bear mask, but it wasn't Chris. Were you even paying attention? Or were you just on your phone the whole time, you little shit?
Chambers said in an interview that this is the movie they wanted to make the first time around if they had the time and money to do so, and I do think it's an improvement over its predecessor. But I wouldn't call it a good movie. It feels less like a cynical cash grab than their first attempt, and it had some neat ideas, but it still has quite a few issues that could have been solved by better writing. Unlike Blood and Honey 1, I wouldn't say Blood and Honey 2 is a complete waste of time, and if you have Peacock, it won't cost anything to watch it. But set your expectations accordingly. It's definitely an upgrade, but they only went from bad to mediocre.
And that's about as close to praising the movie as you're going to get from me. Next time, we're going to dive back into the world of Bond. James Bond. Until then, I am the Smeghead, and I'm gonna go watch Pooh baseball bat that chick's head again. That was awesome.